Okay. Okie dokie. And I'll just spotlight myself for everybody. And welcome, good evening, good morning. Hello to everybody. How wonderful that we're a truly global group meeting in this way. So, yes, we're on this wonderful course, Helpful Habits. And I like this approach because often we hear about the 10 non-virtuous actions and all the negativities, and we can almost get quite bogged down in that. But along with the 10 non-virtuous actions that we should be trying to avoid, there are the 10 virtuous ones, or the 10 really positive ways of acting and speaking and being in the world, positive things that we can put in place. And that changes everything. So, I'm hoping that we'll have a really good balance between removing or abandoning the negative habits and then putting in place really positive ones. So using the power of habit to help us. So I'm really thrilled to be invited by Shanti Deva Centre to be able to lead this course on these Saturday mornings here in Brisbane or Friday nights over in the US. And so the course is based on Buddhist psychology and supported by my amateur enthusiasm for Western psychology and putting things into more accessible terms without, well, hopefully without watering it down in any way. Because the Buddhist psychology is quite challenging and quite radical. And that is because it is liberating. Like literally, it can liberate us completely from cyclic existence. And that's quite a different approach than from Western psychology, which just kind of seeks to help us kind of make do. Buddhist psychology is far more ambitious and long-reaching. So in the course, we've been looking at, last week was the nature of habits. And then we're going to have a deep dive into what are called the three doors, or the three ways that we kind of function: body, speech, and mind. And we're going to have the deep dive in today and start with the mind. So it's about 2 hours, but we're going to have a break about an hour in, take about 5 minutes to have a stretch, go to the loo, have a glass of water, change our environment for a moment, and then reset again. And so just speaking with Anna just before we started, it was so nice to hear that you found the reflection sheets useful. There's more reflection sheets as well today, so that we've got something to continue on with. So this class, it's relevant whether you're a Buddhist or not, whether you're religious or not. Uh, it's like if you use body, speech, or mind, this is going to be essential material. To get started, I like to have a little question, uh, just to pique our interest a bit. So today's questions, because we're looking at the mind, what mental attitudes do you want to stop? So the mental obsessions, compulsions, usually the mental attitudes, the first things that we recognize are the results of mental attitudes. So we want to stop depression and anxiety, but they're actually not the cause, they're the result. And then it's not just all negative, right? So then the other thing is, what inequalities would we like to develop? So I'm just going to leave those questions up on the screen while we take a moment to set our motivation. So adjusting your posture. The 2-point posture is so that you feel your spine is relatively straight, your posture fairly alert. And once you've straightened the spine, which is like that solid pillar in the middle of our body that supports us, once the spine is straight and aligned, then we can relax our body. And to straighten the spine, you can imagine like a pillar, one brick on top of the next, or like a pile of coins, one coin on top of the next. Each one supports the one above it. So we don't have to put any effort into it. Each of our vertebrae in our spine supports the one above it. So you might find that you need to just sit back a little bit. Feel that central column of strength in your body. Allow your spine to become aligned. You might notice that your head should just tilt slightly forward and tuck the chin in. And with each in-breath, feel that your posture becomes slightly more alert. And then with each out-breath, release the tension from the body. And just let your focus rest gently on the breath without needing to control the breathing in any way, letting the body breathe itself. Just having your focus tethered to the breath, the rolling rhythm of the breathing in, breathing out. And as you do this, you might notice that your mind becomes distracted, or it becomes very tired now that all the agitation has stopped. But whatever it is in your internal experience, just notice it, name it, whether it's a distraction or a sinking feeling, whether you're calm, whether you're agitated, just notice and name, and then put it aside and just keep the focus on the breath. Notice the texture of your inner experience. Notice the feeling without judging it as good or bad. If you notice that you're a little bored, use this neutral feeling tone to rest in the calming rhythm of the breath. If you feel you're quite buoyant or happy, try to let these feelings be there without wanting more or without chasing after them, just letting them rest there. If you're feeling a bit low or grey, try to be with that feeling too, without identifying it as you. You're not reducible to any one feeling. Any thoughts or feelings or sensations that arise, they arise in the natural spaciousness of your mind. So as they arise, let them fall away. And recognizing that natural spaciousness of the mind in which all of our experiences arise, you can also remember that the potential of this natural spaciousness and clarity, the potential or the nature of the mind is luminosity. And we can develop all of the good qualities to their utmost extent, all of our innate good qualities. the natural luminosity, kindness and love, wisdom within our mind. And so we can take a moment to adjust our motivation, thinking the really long-term motivation to become fully awakened or enlightened, to bring that natural luminosity to reveal it, to become enlightened, not just for our own sake, but so we can help every single living being. And to do so, we can begin by thinking, what are the most prevalent mental attitudes, the ones that we want to stop, that we know dominate us at the moment in our mind? So those things might quite easily come to the fore. But what inner qualities would you like to develop? What mental qualities do you admire in others? And if you could develop those qualities, how would your life change? How would your communication and your activities change? How would it affect your relationships with others? Just take a moment to imagine life like that if you had those inner qualities. And so, with this motivation for oneself and for others, can gently bring your focus back to the room and open your eyes if they're closed. And I wanted to start with this wonderful quote from the Buddha. We are what we think. All that we are arises with our thoughts. With our thoughts, we make the world. So it's all there, isn't it? Basically, our mind is the source of everything. And when we so that our mind being the source of everything, and it's our mind that creates the world. But how does this happen? One of the ways that it happens is that when whatever we dwell on, whatever we turn our mind to and we become habituated with, it becomes a mental activity. So by familiarizing ourselves and dwelling on it, this mental activity becomes stronger, it strengthens, it gathers its own momentum. And those mental activities, their culmination is when we act on them. So this is for both positive and negative things, but it's probably more obvious at the moment in our life with the destructive ones. So this is how our speech and our activities in the world, they're all at first they're determined by our mind, by what's going on in our mind. And in turn, how we act and express ourselves determines the type of person that we become. It has its own momentum, its own consequences, its own complications, and all of that. The Buddhist term for that is karma, karmic cause and effect. So normally when we think about karma, we're just thinking about the effects, but actually far more interesting and important is to look at the causes. So looking at our mental activity, what's going on in our mind. Now, when the Buddhists talk about mind, they point to the heart. They don't point to the head. So when we say mind, we're thinking our entire experience, thoughts, feelings, emotions, assumptions, habits, the whole lot. Mind, inner experience. So our body and speech are servants of the mind. It's the mind that creates everything. So what this means, number one, when it comes to helpful habits, is that we can try and change our physical habits, we can try and change our speech patterns, but if we don't change our mind, any progress that we make, it won't last. So you might look back over your life and think, oh, you've put in a whole lot of effort into changing things and trying to become a good person and like really, really tried. And then every now and again you just bust, just fall back again. Uh, and you might be quite demoralized about that or really disgusted with yourself. Oh, how could I do that? I was going so well and then I just, blew it. So how come that happens is because we haven't started with the mind. We tend to go outwards to the outer things, how we act and how we speak, and forget that to get the strength, we have to change our mind first. So we can't just change through force, through forcing ourselves to stop doing things or stop saying things, um, because then we one day when we're lacking in energy, when we've got the flu, when we're really tired or sleep deprived, or we've had lots of challenges or stress at work, and we don't have any spare energy to try and be good, then all of that trying to control our uh, body and speech, it goes out the window. We don't have that extra energy. So it's really important to work on the mind. That's then that way all the progress that we make it will be stabilized. So working on our mind or changing our mind means becoming aware of what is happening in it. Checking up, as Lama Yeshe always said, check up. And His Holiness the Dalai Lama said, using our human intelligence to respond to um, our innate human intelligence to respond to external circumstances and internal experiences and situations. So noticing how we respond, the feelings and thoughts coming up. There's an Australian saying called keep yourself nice. I don't know if you have it in America, but keep yourself nice is like the Aussie way of talking about the virtuous activities. Uh, so all of the Buddhist practices, they're based on Buddhist science or mind science, understanding how our mind works. And so recognizing how we are interdependent. Everything that we do affects not just ourselves, but others, directly and then indirectly. Everything that we do affects the environment. And so because of that interdependence, whether we're aware of it or not, it is there, then it matters what we do. And so that's where an ethical system arrives. So ethics are universal. It's not like a moralistic code that is imposed upon us. They're universal values that actually are a response to recognizing how we are all interdependent. And so ethics are not religious as such, and they're not beliefs either, and they're not like you should or you shouldn't or you deserve or you don't deserve. They're a response to understanding our human situation, the situation of being a living being. And so so based on recognizing our interdependence, then they're a strategy. They're a strategy to avoid the non-virtuous activities of body, speech, and mind. And so this is why I put up the road signs, because in our windy journey through life, how on earth do we know what to do? So these are like road signs that tell us, whoa, danger ahead, careful, stop here, caution here, go this way, not that way. So they're not thou shalt nots. They are really helpful suggestions for us to navigate those windy roads through life. And it matters that we act in this way because everybody matters. So how we feel matters to us, but how others feel matters as much to them. Everybody has feelings, so everybody matters. So what we do really matters. And that's why we need to develop a strong sense of ethics and an ethical practice. So our ethics includes everybody. It's not just our near and dear. We can't have any favoritism here or any double standards or bias. It's got to include everybody because everybody matters. So the way that we can categorize it are three doors of activity: body, speech, and mind. And the strategy is first abandon the negativity and then practice its opposite, the positive thing. It's important that we do this because we may think that just not doing something, not retaliating, for instance, that it doesn't count, but it really does count. It's just that it's not so obvious. And then in that space, if we can do something positive, fantastic. But we've got to make sure that we abandon the negativity first, because otherwise it's kind of like being a junkie and taking all this heroin, but also trying to have a really good diet, making sure we get enough sleep. Like you have to remove the poison first. Then all the effort you put into having a good diet and taking vitamins will actually have some effect. So, along with those road signs, not only do we have a windy path through life and we're trying to stay on the path, we're also half the time we're drunk drivers, aren't we? We're driving under the influence, the disturbing emotions. And so everything that we do, we're just stumbling, well, at least me, stumbling from one situation to the next under the influence of whatever emotional habits, responses, reactivity, all of that stuff. So, I mean, it's pretty extraordinary that we're here to start with, isn't it? So, if we're going to dive right into the cause of it all, the mind, body and speech are servants of the mind. Just by changing our physical habits, but not our mind, any progress that we make, it won't last, including trying to overcome addictions. We can overcome addictions by changing our circumstances, our peer group who we're hanging out with, by replacing it with something else. But if we actually don't change the addictive nature of our mind, it's going to come up again some stage. So, what is a mental non-virtuous action? Because when I first heard about the 10 non-virtues, I didn't realize they were actions. So, what's a mental activity? It's kind of a bit strange to get our head around, but what it is, mental actions are when we dwell on something, we strengthen it, and then we act on it. So, hopefully, with the negative ones, we don't always end up acting on them, even if they may cause so much turmoil and distress inside our mind, we might be able to actually stop acting on them. Positive mental actions also, they have a huge effect on our mind, and it is fantastic when we end up acting on them as well. In terms of the negative mental actions that the non-virtuous ones, the three worst ones are covetousness, ill will, and mistaken views. So covetousness, just, I just want what others have. Ill will or malice, and mistaken views or confusion. So they're the three main ones to tackle, which we'll probably do in a moment. What I wanted to go through first was to find out just what you reckon about, have you recognized any destructive uh, mental habits in your, and then we'll also have a look at some positive ones if you can recognize any positive ones. So I've been talking for a while now. What were some of the destructive mental habits that came to mind when we first started today's class, or something that you really hope to be able to overcome in this lifetime? What are some of those things? Who's going to be
Judgmental.
brave and go first? Maureen.
Being judgmental.
Being judgmental. Yes, I hear you. I'm like that too. I I I often, even before judgmental, I do that thing where I sort people out. not just into like sort them out into short and tall, but like, don't like, positive, negative, pleasant, unpleasant, good, bad, like just have that impulse to sort them out into categories, and then almost in a split second the judgmental comes in onto the
Yeah.
person.
And I think it's because we have so many labels.
Yeah, we have so many labels, and those labels have connotations on them that we may not be aware of. And so
Yes.
that goes back to what we were talking about last week of we almost immediately end up judging the person instead of the behavior, judge the
Yes.
person instead of the personality, the
Yes.
characteristic. So spot on. Judgmentalism is a great one to get in our sights. Who else has one?
Feelings of not being
Anita.
good enough. Yes, feelings of not being good enough.
Yes, thinking that you're not good enough. So that's almost like judgmentalism towards oneself, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, spot
Yeah, and
on.
it
Yeah,
can
yep.
be a pretty continuous habit. Yeah. Who else? Wiley.
Being too reactive, just lashing out before you take time to really consider either what is being said or how to respond more,
Yeah.
respectfully or,
So do you mean, so that's like being reactive? Have you managed to catch it like first being reactive in your mind before, say, speaking or acting?
that's what I'm trying to do is before. And usually it's with in my case, it's if I see an injustice to something, I very lash out really quick. And then that ends up not being necessarily the right thing to do either.
Yeah. So yes, that's like it's a great shame, but there's also a seed of positivity there because seeing injustice, and it's good if you could probably try and think of a situation and then slow it down into slow motion and notice in that slow motion movie all the responses that you have because it's a mixed bag there. There's positive and negative in there, and you've got to be able to distinguish between the two. So what's the first thing that happens when you experience injustice?
Just I get really angry, so I guess anger would be part of it. And then I just want to like lash out and tell the person to stop it or
Right.
and then when I do
So
the pausing, then I feel like am I doing the Lojong thing that says to not lie in wait? Because I feel like
no, but so getting angry, what happens before that?
Mhm. I guess it's just the feeling in the body, the tightness, the restriction, and then
Uh,
just the
and
lashing out.
yeah, but what happens before that feeling, that tightness and restriction in the body? What's before that? Because that's a result, right? So
Yeah.
what's before it?
I guess it's seeing the something that is upsetting, or yeah.
That's it. That's it. So
Mm.
now we're getting somewhere. So seeing something upsetting, somebody hurt, and our natural empathy kicks in without us even knowing it. And so we feel that hurt. It's like in Western science, they call it mirror neurons. They don't exist. It's a really nice metaphor to use because we've got to, materialize everything in order to believe in it in the West. So they call it mirror neurons, but what it is, it's your natural empathy. When you actually see suffering or recognize suffering, you feel it as if it's your own. And that's the first thing that happens. And then almost instantaneously after that comes, I don't want it. And that's the anger. So if you could slow-mo it down all the way to before, and we may not even know that we're angry, but now we're angry. We're just all tight and restricted. So that's like it's a little red flag there. You go, aha, something's going on. Yeah. So We're already getting somewhere. Fantastic. Thank you, Wiley. Now, Mary Cotter, you had your hand up too.
Well, I'd say my biggest flaw is that I make these big plans and then I procrastinate and then I become lazy and then they never materialize. Like today's the Buddhist holiday and I had this plan to do practice all day and it, and it hasn't materialized. So that's something if I could change, that'd be really
Oh,
great.
yeah. And then the end result is, do you feel inspired or tired?
Tired.
Yeah, I hear you. I suffer from procrastination too. I really do. Anyone else here suffer from procrastination? Yeah, it's a killer, isn't it? So again, I think if you slow motion it down to really seeing there's a positive and a negative in there as well. So one, it's fantastic to have aspirations. And we can never let go of those aspirations because really we should be aspiring to develop bodhicitta in the heart, to develop wisdom, understanding reality, to become liberated from cyclic existence forever, to be able to liberate everybody else as well. They're fantastic aspirations. And so they're enjoyable things to think about. And we've got to let ourselves really think about them and then support them with understanding, with mind science, with understanding how it's possible. It's not just a wish, but it is possible. And it's probably a lot more possible than a whole lot of other things that we devote time to. So we make them strong, support them with our wisdom. And then just off the top of my mind, I think it's really important to surround ourselves with people that can help us. So you might be the one with the aspirations and somebody else might be the really practical one, but they don't have many aspirations. So you gotta hang out together. So one has the impetus with all of the great thoughts, and then the other one comes along and goes, "Oh, let's figure out how to do it." So we need like a little Dharma team or a life team where we can each do our part. I've just been watching Tour de France. I'm completely addicted to Tour de France. And so, there's the winner of each stage, but it's actually the team. And they have these guys on the team called the super domestiques. And to be a super domestique, it's like a bodhisattva attitude. You just do all this work for the one guy that just goes along and right at the end, they just have to sprint to the end and win. So we need a team. One person's with the aspirations, to win, but everybody else does all this work, and it's the whole team that wins. So that's one thing, but also I think with procrastination, what comes in also is all the ego, the wish to be perfect without actually being able to support it by anything, and then the whole lot just collapses under its own weight, and then we just throw our hands up and give up our aspirations, which is the tragedy, isn't it? So this is great. These are pretty universal problems that we have. I've also got a list here. I think some of them we've mentioned. So we have mental habits of nervousness, worry, anxiety, restlessness. They kind of all go together. Social anxiety that becomes a habit. It's a response to something, but then it gets its own momentum. We have the other side, depression, the weight of procrastination, avoiding important aspects of our life, being self-defeated. So those things that are nagging and niggling at us that we just go, no, I don't want to think about it, don't want to think about it. And what does it do? It sucks the life force out of us. We can have destructive mental habits of rage, compulsive thoughts of revenge, violent fantasies, how we just like to throttle somebody. It can be supported by all of prejudice, bigotry, all this inner bias that we don't even know that we have. We can have overthinking. Too much mental agitation. It's like panicked distraction, obsessive, and we think it's about what we're thinking about. We get really involved in the contents, and we can't recognize that it's nothing to do with the contents. It's actually just an agitated mind. It wouldn't matter what our mind alighted on, what topic, would still be agitated. Confused as to what's right and what's wrong. This one too, it's a little bit more of a subtle mental destructive habit. And it comes out where we think, oh, people should act like this and not like that. So far, so good. But then we do something like that, but we've got a reason. Oh, we're different because such and such happened. We have all these inner justifications why we're different. It's a shifting morality, and we're kind of always adjusting it so that if it's us, we let ourselves off the hook. Whereas somebody else, it's like, no way, baby. And there's just general ones. Dissatisfaction, just always wanting more. The glass half empty personality. And this one, again, we might think it's the things. We get so involved in the things. But actually, it wouldn't matter what things they were, we still are not satisfied. So no doubt we're all quite familiar with these mental habits, inner kind of momentum that happens. But what about some positive ones? So again, I'm going to see, does anyone have any well-entrenched positive habits? Now, I know you all do because you're all here for starters, but the thing is, can you recognize that you have well-entrenched positive habits? Yes, Anna.
I feel I'm always curious, and I feel like being curious allows me to listen to others. And I've gotten better. I've gotten better at pausing and actually listening.
Right. And so curiosity, it's a nice feeling, isn't it? Curiosity is probably one of the best mental habits that we can have. It's just fantastic. Because it's almost like the opposite of procrastination in a way, because our mind's relaxed, we're okay about being a beginner, so we don't have these huge heavy weight of expectations on us, just kind of naturally curious. So it takes a bit of courage as well. Fantastic. That's a good one. What other positive mental habits do we have? You're gone blank. I'll give you a hint. Sometimes they're quite cliched, or some sayings that we have, or maybe that our parents told us. Jocelyn, you've got one. Oh, let's see. Ask to unmute. Oh, there you go.
Generosity.
Yeah. So sorry, what was the positive habit?
Generosity.
Generosity. So yes, so explain a little bit more about, say, the difference between the mental habit and the physical one. I caught you there. Because again, I mean, I'm glad you brought that up, Jocelyn, because often we think generosity is a physical thing. We give stuff. And if we don't have stuff, then we can't be generous and then we feel bad. I mean, that's kind of the habitual, the normal way of thinking about it. But actually, generosity is mostly a state of mind. So, Jocelyn, you're right. This thought, this wish to share is where it starts. And then if we have something to share, then we do. And if we don't, it doesn't stop this feeling of wanting to share. So it's really important that we recognize it as a positive mental habit, this wish to share or to help, because recognizing it as a mental or a heartfelt impulse, that we can continue to nurture. Whether we have the time to actually do it, whether we have the thing to give, whether we have the mental fortitude to be there, that's secondary. The main thing is this inner wish. So spot on. And Shannon, what about you? Yeah.
I've got an openness to learning new things.
Yep. An openness to learning new things. So, what do you feel when you come across something that you don't know or don't understand? How do you actually do it?
I guess it's similar to what the person said before about being curious.
Yeah.
And reading or asking or observing.
Fantastic. So that attitude, that will take you from here to enlightenment. It's really important because just being able to ask, it's such a big deal, actually. And many of us have a big block of being able to ask for help or to ask about something, to learn about something, because again, we think, because I don't know about something, therefore I'm an idiot. So we don't know, and then we put the judgment of I'm an idiot, and then we feel bad, and then of course we stop. So instead of going, I just don't know something, and having that confidence to be able to go, but I can find out. So we don't put the judgment or the idea of a self in there. We just go with the momentum of curiosity and openness. But to get to that positive mental habit, there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes because we have to get rid of our egotism and our pride and our self-doubt and all of those things. Okay, so I've put together some positive mental habits, but they pretty much come from cliched sayings, but I really like them. So walk a mile in their shoes. So often we try and do that, don't we? We try and put ourselves in someone else's shoes. And it takes a bit of effort at first, but it changes how we think about them when we think about their circumstance. So in Australia and probably in America too, there's a huge amount of homelessness happening now. There's a lot of people that are becoming homeless that don't want to be homeless, that haven't, there is a bunch of people that prefer to sleep rough. But now I think in Australia, the homelessness has tripled in the last couple of years. And so you can look at people and at first you might have a judgmental attitude. Oh, they've let themselves go. And then you find out, oh my gosh, they're living in their car. They can't actually lie down flat to sleep. There's nowhere to wash. They're only eating crap food because who can afford good, fresh veggies in a kitchen and all of this. So now suddenly you walk in their shoes. Wow, how you feel about them completely changes. So just about anybody that we're frightened of or who annoys us, if we found out their circumstances and walked a mile in their shoes, how we felt about them would naturally change. In fact, that's why they have marathons and walkathons and everything, because we are literally walking a mile in someone's shoes, raising money for some event or something, which is really great, putting it into practice. There's another fantastic saying, there for the grace of God go I. So again, I look at myself, my fortunate circumstances, and I look at someone who's experiencing homelessness, and I think just a little fork in the road here or there, and that would have been me. And probably I would have been reacting far worse than this person here. Look for the silver lining, opportunity in the situation. So this is like a positive mindset, isn't it? Things change and we normally go, oh no. But if we have this momentum this automatic response, things change and we go, oh, goody, what's next? How interesting. This silver lining, there's always one in there. And the COVID pandemic is a case in point. Look what happened to all the Dharma centers. We went from little closed communities to this amazing online Dharma community. It was a wrenching thing that got it happening, but now look, the world has changed for us. So when things go wrong, instead of going, oh no, how fascinating. So I'm not sure if I mentioned this in this class or the last class, but I saw a documentary on a great conductor called Benjamin Zander. And he was held summer schools for really talented musicians. And so they would practice whatever incredible pieces and then put on various concerts. And as they were practicing, he'd go, no, stop. We've gone off track here or whatever. And then he turned to the orchestra and say, what do we say when we've made a mistake? And everybody in unison replies, how fascinating. So this too is a good thing to plug into your mind. Whenever you make a mistake, say, how fascinating. And whenever something breaks or you drop something or it smashes, instead of going, oh no, go, oh, of course. So at Library Tampa Centre, we have our tea in the kitchen, and every now and again, someone will drop a cup and you hear the smash of the cup. And then, everything stops. Everyone goes quiet. And then I'm just waiting for the voice to pop out from the kitchen going, of course. Because honestly, porcelain cups, what is their end point? There is no other end point except smashed. I mean, they find a cup from 2,000 years ago, one, and it's wow, how amazing, because every other cup in existence has smashed. So of course it's going to happen. And it's a really good mental attitude to rejig ourselves. There's a couple of others. So in an argument, giving the victory to the other. And again, this is about instead of just always that impulse to always be right, to recognize you can save the relationship by giving the victory to the other. You can have the victory and there goes the relationship, or you can give the victory to them and save the relationship, and that's our choice. There's a couple of other things too of that whole idea of paying it forward, which I think I mentioned last week. Gratitude, recognizing the kindness of others. So we're very easy at recognizing the injusticeness and meanness of others, but recognizing the kindness of others can become a very strong mental habit. We've got to plug it in first. And the fact that we live in a civilized culture, and it is civilized when you look back over the history of the world, what we have now is challenging and difficult, but we can read, we've got a health system, we've got roads, we've got indoor plumbing, all of these things that it's from the efforts of others. How amazing. Another positive habit that we can do is to celebrate milestones or recognize milestones, to actually really appreciate milestones. So appreciate when someone graduates from school or when someone learns to drive, when someone overcomes a disease, things that actually need to be celebrated, even birthdays. So from Buddhist point of view, you wouldn't celebrate a birthday as in just ordinary happy birthday. You'd celebrate you've managed to live this long and hold on to this precious human life, and celebrate what we can do with this life. How amazing. Now there's a question here from Megan. Should we practice generosity to practice discipline and not be so attached to material goods? Or should we practice generosity to practice kindness and giving? So there's a couple of things. So one is that generosity is actually the antidote, or one of the opposite to miserliness. So we'll have a look at miserliness or covetousness and see what we can do about it. Should we practice generosity? It's going to benefit us. So there is an intelligent incentive for us, but it can also benefit others. And as we know, when we practice generosity, say you share a meal, you end up with less food yourself, but you end up with so much more, don't you? A shared meal. So we've got to look at actually what is happening here when we share, and especially when we share our inner qualities, our kindness or our tolerance. It's good for us and it's good for others. We may have less time in the day to do other stuff, but what we've added to our well-being and others' well-being is huge. So also, by practicing generosity, it whittles away our attachment, and our attachment keeps us in bondage. So it's not so much, oh, we should practice generosity. It's no one telling us. I mean, and if I'm told I should do something, I don't like it at all. But actually, it will help us. It will release us from bondage. And if it's hard, doesn't matter. Just start with little things. Giving good things to the op shop is a great place to start. Not your crap to the op shop. Some good things. Maybe some little things, and think, no, someone else is going to really enjoy this. Give it to the op shop. Okay, so let's get our screen back up again. So yes, in an argument, give the victory to others rather than win at the expense of the relationship. Pay it forward. Any good deed done, pay it forward to somebody else. Continue the momentum. Celebrate the milestones and the gratitude. And I'd probably add in another one here too for a positive mental state of mind would be seeing all things as being like an illusion. So things aren't as they seem. It's a very positive mental habit. It's like having positive doubt. And the result of that will be our curiosity will increase, but it gives us much more flexibility and a gentleness of our mind. So that's in general. Let's just now take a little dive into, of those three non-virtuous mental activities, the most destructive one and the most tricky one is mistaken views. So our whole aim should be to try and avoid mistaken views. But how to do this is a lifelong task. It's the most entrenched, most difficult one that we have to do. And that's why I thought we'd just start at the hardest one, because that informs everything else. And then from here on in, everything else gets easier. So how do we even know we've got mistaken views? You know, how do we even, mistaken views, not seeing reality clearly, being confused. So we know we have this as a mental activity if we find that we are dominated by confusion, if we're often confused, befuddled. Sometimes I go through life feeling punch drunk, like I'm just not with it. We also know we have mistaken views if we have real strong fundamentalist views. They should, they shouldn't. It is like this. It's not like that. This is the way it is. Those really rigid views, often judgmental. So we all have fundamentalist tendencies. The thing is to recognize when they start to arise. if we're feeling cynical or bored, a bit jaded. And this one can often happen in Dharma centers with long-term students. They start getting a bit old and cranky and a bit cynical. And again, it's a result of mistaken views. You know, getting a bit tired and a bit lazy, kind of all mixed in together. So also boredom. Boredom is a symptom of a low-lying global mistaken views if we're bored. And again, it's not that boredom is bad. Actually, it's important that we sit and do nothing until we're bored, because then we're becoming aware of the state of play. But it's a bit tricky in our culture now because we're continuously distracted. So we have no idea. We have no symptom arising as an incentive to do something about it. And another indication that we have mistaken views is if we often feel isolated, feel that we have no protection, no one is looking after us. We feel intimidated. So on one hand, there's kind of like feeling cynical, bored, intolerant, and on the other, feeling isolated, unprotected. So it's quite subtle, isn't it? What do all these things have in common? They're all results. What are they results of? Having mistaken or distorted views in our mind that dominate our mind, and then they create our reality. So, I mean, this is the central problem. If we can cut this one at the root, we would attain nirvana or enlightenment. So how on earth, as beginners, what do we start with? And there are some things we can get started with straight away. And one of them, believe it or not, is to abandon feelings of indifference towards others. Who knew? But really, this is like a life hack for us of bringing forth our wisdom and abandoning mistaken views. So feelings of indifference come because we're not paying attention to others, we're not putting ourselves in their shoes, we're not recognizing the kindness of others, we're all self-obsessed, or we're intimidated by them, or we've lost our curiosity, all of that. And so the result is kind of feeling indifferent. So abandon those feelings of indifference, really encourage your curiosity. And to abandon prejudice or partiality. So the first step of abandoning these things is to recognize that you have them. So have the courage to recognize your indifference towards others. Recognize your partiality, how you care about these ones and you don't care about those ones. To recognize if you have prejudice. We all have prejudice one way or another. That prejudice is dangerous when we don't know we have it. So here we are, you know, for instance, I'm a white woman. So white, I probably am completely oblivious to all of the privileges that I have. I just take them for granted. But thank goodness I've got the other thing of being discriminated against, of being a woman. So now I know what it's like. So actually, you know, then that gives me a way into feeling for others. I may have nothing else in common with a whole bunch of women, but just the fact of being women, we know what it's like. So immediately now we have connection. So abandon those two. And how do we do it? Well, we pay less attention to our own feelings and inquire after the well-being of others. So that takes a bit of effort. But we can do it by recognizing just as our own feelings are so important and we really want other people to acknowledge us and appreciate us and pay attention to us, everybody feels like that. So we can do that for somebody else. How amazing. Inquire after their well-being. Develop that curiosity. And allow yourself to be a beginner, to not know and to ask questions. So I'm so glad you brought up that kind of angle of the curiosity and being relaxed enough to ask. What to practice instead? Inquiring after others, freely questioning, allowing yourself to ask a new question each day instead of just the same old things, allowing yourself to become curious. Other things also is to respect what are called civic rules or the laws of the land. So this is one of the ways that we can just clear our life up a bit. So, you know, when COVID happened and we had to do social distancing, just having that mindfulness of social distancing, of respecting others' space is so important. And what that does, just that little thing of practicing social distancing, behind it is enormous, isn't it? There's the care about others. There's the whether I like them or not, I'm going to help them. Thinking about the rest of society, having some physical discipline, all of this courageousness, tolerance, everything. And it just comes out at, oh, I'm going to respect the law. What else to practice? Embracing other cultures, other cooking traditions. Find out about the various herbs and spices from another country. Go and join a cooking club together or a gardening club together. And because in those different fantastic cultural, embracing the other cultural practices, then we find the commonality of human beings. There's a great show on Australian TV called You Can't Ask That. And let me stop this for a moment. It's on the ABC, Australian Broadcasting Commission, and it's their most successful show ever in history. You can't ask that. I don't know, you might be able to find some of it on YouTube. They're about 20-minute episodes on really taboo topics. And so, for instance, it might be about dwarfism. So they get a whole lot of dwarfs onto the show, and then all the questions will be, what is it about like dwarf throwing, or you know, all of these different that you'd never ask, you'd never have the guts. And so then they are, and then they answer the questions. Or it might be about that. There's one on ex-footballers, and all these questions you'd never ask ex-footballers. About there's one about have you killed somebody? And so there's people there that have accidentally hit a pedestrian, or that have accidentally run over their baby, or have been a drunk driver. And there's such a revelation, these episodes. There's about, I don't know, 60, 70 of them now. And this amazing thing happens that at the end of 20 minutes, you feel like you have lifelong friends. Because these people have just been so open. And because the question is what, you know, would probably come out of our mouth if we were drunk. There's just this meeting of from how at the beginning we felt different to now we see we're all human beings. We all have feelings. We all have humor. We all matter. It's just a mind-blowing show. Anyway, if you can possibly get your hands on it, I highly recommend it. The other thing that we can do for what to practice instead is just to try and learn a new skill. So in that, joining a club to learn a hobby, or learn how to drive, or learn how to play the accordion, or one of those things, it being thrown into being a beginner, being confused, being demoralized because you're no good at it, thinking that you're a loser, then realizing you're not a loser, you just don't know how to play the accordion, all of this stuff. It all happens in this little microcosm of just learning a new language or learning how to cook scrambled eggs. A whole lot happens in there. So little exercises like that of learning a new skill, we get to put everything into practice. So if we can do that, the result of being able to abandon those things and practice those things are, the result is that whatever we study will expand our heart and mind. So whatever we turn our mind to will only serve to make us a better person, develop our wisdom and expand our heart. It won't make us more closed. It won't make us more set in our ways. Whatever we study will help us rather than entrench our prejudices. And so we will feel better. So we look at this result where the more we know about the world, the better we feel, the more connected we feel to others. That's the result that we want. How do we get it? By abandoning those things, practicing those things. And so the bumper sticker for this, everybody, is to remember how things appear is not how they are. So that's our kind of training in words life hack for avoiding mistaken views. How things first appear is not how they are. That we can be absolutely certain of. So this is like having a healthy doubt in your mind. How you first read a situation is not the whole story. How you first read a person is not the whole story. So do we have any questions about this one? Any comments, thoughts, anything at all? How are you going? It is the trickiest one, avoiding mistaken views. If everyone's okay, let's have a little 5-minute break, or maybe let's make it 4 minutes. Get up, change the environment, the point of view, and we'll come back. And if you've got any questions might have percolated up, then we can address those. So see you in 4 minutes. Okay, so after our little break, any thoughts, comments, questions came up? How are we going? Okay, so far so good. Let's get into something a little bit more tangible then, because this one of avoiding mistaken views, we don't even know we have mistaken views, do we? All we kind of can start with is by recognizing we have symptoms and that they're symptoms of mistaken views. So just even recognizing that we're confused, that we're befuddled, as Kandrella says, about reality. It's kind of good to notice it instead of go, oh, you idiot, you're befuddled, to just go, aha, befuddlement. That is a result of mistaken or distorted views, a distorted attitude of having assumptions. So a great punk singer of the 80s, Lydia Lunch, she said this really good thing: assumption is the root of all evil. And it's true. It's and Hannah Arendt said a similar thing in a much more eloquent way about that whole concept of banal evil, that evil isn't some huge malicious kind of premeditated thing. It's banal. We don't even know that we have it. It's really ordinary, and it's this deep-seated ignorance. So yeah, the Buddhist kind of version of that, or the way of describing that, is talking about distorted views. Yeah, Jocelyn.
And because it also comes from our education.
Yes, that's right. Our education, or our lack of education, the bias in our education. So yeah, if we're just taught dogma at school, or a version of history, well, history is always taught by the victors, then we're already missing out a whole lot. And unless we know somebody from another culture, we wouldn't even know. And then so much of school education is motivated to getting a job. not necessarily to improving our life. And the most important life skills, how to have a relationship without resorting to violence. Where is that taught? It's not taught anywhere. It doesn't come naturally. Parenthood as well. I mean, where is that taught? Well, I think in Queensland when I was at school, we were taught that in grade 9, which is really weird. So grade 9, we were 12, 13, 14 years old. And there was a whole class called Mothercraft. I think the year that I did it, they changed it to Parentcraft, but it was Mothercraft. So I don't know what it was about Queensland, but they were trying to teach everybody how to look after babies when they were 14. They didn't teach them sex education. How weird is that? So I was allergic to the entire class, but I had a very nice workbook, so I aced it, but I never actually even held the doll of the baby or anything like that. I look back now and I just think that was a very, very strange education system. So yeah, unless we're taught that, like the meta-analysis, not the stuff, but the theory of learning. How do we learn? And then if you've been whipped at school for getting the answer wrong, that's a very difficult thing to, as an adult, to encourage yourself to have curiosity and to get answers wrong, to dare to question something and come up with a wrong thing and make a mistake and go, oh, well, I'll find out more, without coming down on yourself like a pile of bricks. Yes, so education. And Lama Zopa Rinpoche, Jocelyn, said that's the whole point of the Buddha Dharma, is to educate the heart, educate how to be a good human being. The most important thing, educate how to be happy. So in America, I hear you have this thing, the pursuit of happiness, that everyone has the right to pursue happiness. And that is fantastic. But no one's taught how to do it. What's the point of having a right if you don't even know how to do it? It's like everyone has the right to be unhappy as well. And so much of the way that we pursue happiness is what His Holiness calls the suffering that we run towards. So education, very profound. And in fact, in terms of when someone was mentioning generosity, that's the supreme generosity, is to share the Dharma or to educate, to help others open their minds and be curious, to learn how to question and analyze. That is the supreme generosity. All right. So let's have a look at some easier ones now. We've done the avoiding the mistaken views. So now let's have a look at avoiding covetousness. So how do we even know we're covetous? It's such a biblical sounding term, isn't it? If our mind is dominated by desire or dominated by dissatisfaction, if we feel we're never content, that inner restlessness, or if we just feel like everything that we have breaks, it degenerates really quickly. We get a new car and it gets scratched. We get a new computer and it's no good. We get a new dinner set and it breaks. We get a, this, and just the shine goes off life. You also know you have covetousness if you actually, if whatever we covet, whatever we're hankering after, comes to its culmination and we have the affair, we commit fraud, we take the thing. So that's the culmination of covetousness. But before we have the affair or before we commit fraud, what's been happening in our mind? We just want what someone else has. So that's a state of mind. And what covetous combined with the distorted views, we just want what others have. The distorted view is thinking that our happiness comes from the thing. So it's kind of like the covetousness and the distorted views mush in together and become really strong. And so then it culminates in us trying to get the thing. And then, of course, complications set in. There are some other examples of covetousness, I think, that in our society encourage it. So all the gambling and the buy now, pay later, hoarding tendencies, they're all symptoms of having covetousness. So what to abandon, how to abandon it, is to see the faults of having desire, how desire is like drinking salt water. The more we have, for a second our thirst is quenched, and then we're even more thirsty. If desire worked, we'd get the thing. We would have got the thing when we were 5 and we would have been fine. That's it. We got the thing, we're satisfied, and we'd still be satisfied now. The fact that when we were 5, we wanted the teddy, and then when we were 10, we wanted the whatever else, and when we were 20, we wanted something, and when we were 30, we wanted something, shows there's faults in having desire, because it doesn't work. So abandon attachment. Stop thinking about your own wealth, dwelling on it, accumulating more, or other people's wealth, how much they have that we want. So it's quite a big ask, all of this, isn't it? I mean, we are living in what's called the desire realm. Our whole world is driven by desire. So it's okay if you're feeling a bit overwhelmed at this moment. We're seeing the faults in desire. What we've got to really do is recognize that the object is not the source of our happiness. So someone a while ago asked B. Alan Wallace, if you're going to sum up Buddhism or Buddhist practice in just a few words, what would you say? And he said something like, the happiness is not in the object. It's really good, isn't it? The happiness isn't in there. We get the thing and we'll be happy. So another of the shows that I'm really addicted to is watching the hoarders shows. Oh man, it's just the human tragedy and suffering. It's just extraordinary. I sometimes find it quite unbearable to watch, but also strangely addictive. And so in one of the shows, there was this elderly lady whose husband had died unexpectedly quite a few years ago, and she was so distressed and distraught about it and really, really missed him. And that was what kind of kicked off her hoarding tendencies. And the whole house was just chockers full of just stuff and what to outsiders would look like rubbish. Anyway, so they get the professional organizers in and they have various degrees of success. But what happened, she managed to get rid of just about everything except for an old pair of trousers, of his trousers. Dirty, sweat-stained trousers. And it kind of came down to really clearly that she couldn't let go of these trousers. And the counselor there was saying, if you throw out your husband's trousers, you're not throwing out your husband. But she'd meshed the two together, you know, thinking that happiness is in the thing, and that if we keep the things, we'll remember the person, we'll somehow keep the person. So this isn't an intellectual thing that we do, it's deep in our psyche. And so then, of course, you're unable to let go of the things because you feel like you are abandoning your husband. So the counselor, the professional organizer there was actually very skillful, because she really pointed out that by throwing those rotten old trousers out, you can't throw your husband out, because your husband lives there in your heart. It's okay. And so what the lady couldn't kind of recognize at first was that feeling in her heart that she just loves her husband anyway, whether he's there or not, and that getting rid of the trousers is not a betrayal. And she was able to do that, and she just cried and cried, and so did everybody else. It was just like a complete release, a release from bondage. So, you know, the hoarding it's a really serious thing, and I think, you know, probably all of us would hoard to a degree, but maybe we don't have the opportunity to. But it's there, and often it's triggered by great loss, somebody really close to you dying. I've got a very close friend a friend died in one of the bushfires here in Australia, and that kicked off her hoarding tendencies. And she's so embarrassed about it. But that feeling of it turns into covetousness is what it is. And so with her one, she, in any little scrap of something, she'll see the potential, and so she won't be able to abandon it. Breaks her heart to abandon it. So she just keeps everything. Little scraps of paper because they can be used. Little scraps of string because they can be used. So far, okay, fair enough. Everything can be used. And if you're creative, which she is, it can be used. But then I saw the covetousness in there, the actual tightness of it, which was all the little scraps from the end of doing crochet. You know, you've got a little bit left, she'd keep it all in these little balls. And so then one of my nieces was learning to crochet, and so we're setting her up with this nice little set, beautiful crochet hooks, all the different colors of little balls, and she wouldn't let her have those little scraps of wool. So that's the covetousness. So there's the recognizing they can be used, but then unable to share. No, I have to hold them because she won't appreciate them, or they'll be wasted, or no, that's the covetousness. And I was really shocked when I first saw it. I thought that's where the bondage is. Not in seeing the potential in everything, but in wanting it for ourselves and being unable to share it. And so then there's, you know, so it's like, yeah, you can have a little bit, but then give me back the rest. And now the string's only this long. There's no joy in that. So again, it's so heartbreaking to see. And it's easy to see because it's obvious with hoarding. But what we can do is we take something that is so extreme, and then we turn the mirror back on ourselves and go, well, where do I do that? And I do that with stuff for the op shop. I'm like, oh no, I just want to hold on to this. And then 10 years later, I look at the box and they've rotted. So like, I should have given it to the op shop 10 years ago and someone would have got really great use out of it. But now I've just kept it for myself and now it's no good. What a waste. Does anyone resonate with any of that? So the seeing the potential in things, the enjoying things, no problem. But thinking that our happiness is in the thing and then wanting to keep it for ourselves, big problem, huge bondage. So how to actually free ourselves from that isn't to tell ourselves you're bad or you should give those things up, because that's just sets up this force in our mind. The thing is actually to shift our focus from these external sources of happiness, which are very temporary and end up being imprisoning us, to inner sources of happiness. So we go from the external of wanting to keep all the little threads to the inner source of happiness, which is when we share. When we share something, we feel better. When we share something, our relationship with our relatives gets richer and nicer, and we see their joy and we can help them become a good human being. And now suddenly that becomes more important than the threads, than the little balls of wool. So it's about shifting our focus from the things to the relationship, to what's happening, to what we can contribute, to what we can give, what we have to give. So that's like deepest states of happiness. And they're the ones that bring us a lasting sense of satisfaction. Whereas the hoarding never brings satisfaction. It brings more dissatisfaction, more agitation. And a similar kind of thing with thinking about other people's wealth and starting to resent it, rather than thinking about other people's wealth and fortune and feeling happy for them. Well, I'd like to be rich. They're rich. At least somebody's rich. I hope they can be happy. And one of the ways that we can use in our mind to encourage this is to think someone else at this moment is happy with what I have, with less than what I have. So someone else is happy, genuinely happy with less, then I can be happy too. So it just takes the pressure off a bit. Now, questions, comments about covetousness, craving, obsessions, too close to the bone? Oh, what stays, it happens in Vegas, stays in Vegas. Okay, so here we have. So we abandon that obsessive looking how the grass is greener on the other side, that kind of, because that's practicing dissatisfaction, really. It's nothing to do with what's on the other side. It's the dissatisfied mind. What to practice instead? Rejoicing at others' fortune. So start by those who you love or who you admire. When something good happens to them, feel really happy for them. And really wallow in it. Someone close to you gets a good job, spend a concerted amount of time thinking how fantastic and how happy you are for them. Or someone finally finds a house, how happy you are for them. Their pet recovers, how happy you are for them. Someone completes all their Discovering Buddhism exams, how happy you are for them. Someone does a retreat, how fantastic. So all of these things that if you just spend a moment, you would feel really happy. Start that as a practice. So normally that's with people that we care for or admire. And then we can go over to the strangers. So we hear about good things happening to people on the news. Someone wins the lotto, feel happy for them. What if that was someone close to me, how happy I'd be? Well, they're just not close to me in this life. They're just not close to me at the moment, but I'm really happy for them. It's a great practice because it makes you happy. So when we have miserliness or covetousness, the antidote to that is rejoicing. Is, as Geshe Zopa says, rejoicement. Great rejoicement. How do we do it? Well, we use our mindfulness to become aware of our dissatisfaction without grasping at the things. We use our mindfulness to remember those deeper states of happiness, how happiness comes from giving and sharing and contributing to the world and feeling useful. Happiness doesn't come from getting stuff. It's temporary happiness that comes from the getting, but it doesn't last. So we can't spend all of our time on it. So this recognizing the deeper states of happiness, the times in your life where you felt genuinely satisfied, happy, a good person, it's often when we've done something for others. It's not when we've got the thing. That's like over and gone, isn't it? So these things to practice, they're easy. You know, they're intellectually, they're not that hard. It's just a matter of actually doing it and creating some inner happiness as like a fuel. And the result of this is that everything that we attempt, we will easily accomplish. Things will happen easily, is another way of putting it. And we will achieve everything that we wish for. So that's amazing, isn't it? This is what we want, this result. But normally, how we go about it is by grasping after external things and being kind of resentful about what other people have, or just really, you know, wanting that because they've put a value on it. But actually, if we practice on this side of what to practice, it's a state of mind then that opens our heart and makes everything possible, because covetousness closes our heart. It's an experience of lacking something. So if we work against that, then everything that we do will naturally flow and we will get the help from others and people will be happy to help us. And it'll seem like whatever we touch, it comes to fruition. We get everything that we wish for effortlessly. And the bumper sticker for this one, to get started, the life hack is to say to yourself, what I have is good enough. What I have is good enough. So I think years ago there was a book that came out called The Good Enough Parent. And this was a really good one, because it wasn't like you can't ever be a perfect parent unless you're a Buddha. So you can relax and just think, I'm good enough. And for me, you know, I'm covetous about shoes and luggage. Just, I mean, shoes is it's a bit embarrassing, because what do you do at a Dharma center? You take your shoes off. You don't even wear them. Here I am. I spend all my time at a Dharma center and I'm obsessed with shoes. It's nothing but covetousness. So I have to tell myself over and over and over again, no, I don't have the most perfect shoes in the world, but what I have is good enough. Ooh, like, just relax, Miffi. And it's okay. Then it's like I can have the not perfect shoes and I can be happy with them. It's a little bit of a psychological trick, but I tell you, it works. And it takes that pressure cooker feeling off, wanting more all the time. I just have to say it more. What I have is good enough. So, comments or questions before we go on to the other one? How are we got a plan now for battling covetousness and what to do instead? Rejoicing, generosity. Yeah, I can see some smiles. That's good. Okay. So the final one, probably should have done it the other order, because this one's not so fun either, is it? Ill will, avoiding ill will or avoiding malice. So we might think, oh, you know, I'm not a mean person, but how do we know we have malice in our heart or ill will in our heart, hatred in our heart? If we find our personality is dominated by thoughts of revenge, if we get obsessive about that, if we find ourselves often without any help, nobody helps us. Can't you see I'm in difficulty here and everyone's oblivious, or they laugh at us, or they intimidate us. We live surrounded by a lot of conflict and fear. And so often we think that's our surroundings. But actually, it's a two-way street, because if our mind is dominated by ill will, we will only see conflict around us. We actually won't see any peace. Even if it's there, we won't be able to see it. And then if all we're interacting with is conflict and aggression around us, the only result is going to be more conflict and aggression. So it becomes a vicious cycle. So we can kind of have a look around and go, okay, if I am surrounded by a lot of conflict, I've got a part in this too. Or if I'm surrounded by a lot of fear, if I feel anxiety and fear all the time, it is a result of something. And one of the things it's a result of is ill will in my own mind. And that's a real challenging thing to become aware of. It's quite confronting. And if we find that we ourselves have a predominance of hostility, or around us there's a predominance of hostility. So we have a fear of being attacked. We live in a world of chaos and conflict. Also, if we find that we lose our logic often and we lose our reason, we end up making catastrophic decisions or acting in a catastrophic way. So the culmination of ill will or malice, or thoughts of revenge, of wanting other people to suffer just like we are, that's the ill will. The culmination of that is we end up lashing out. We end up with domestic violence. We end up with terrorism. We end up with murder-suicides. We end up with bullies. We end up with incels. All of these things. So that's when it comes to its ultimate conclusion, ill will. But meanwhile, we can notice it in our personality. And it's really in our best interest to notice if we have these symptoms, we don't want them to come to their fruition. And we don't want to be part of the problem. We want to be part of the solution. So I know some people who are deeply caring people, but they are also deeply critical of everybody else, and live with this thought of it's not quite revenge in their mind, but this thought they don't deserve to be happy. How can they be doing that? They don't deserve to be happy. So that's like a form of ill will in your own mind. It's a hostility in your own mind towards others. And this can kind of happen if we, while you're talking about this before, of if we see injustice and we go off on the wrong track, it can end up becoming our concern for one bunch of people can end up becoming ill will towards another bunch of people. So instead of us ending up more compassionate, we end up with hostility in our heart. And we know how destructive that is and how miserable it makes us. So that's why I was saying it's good to slow everything down. So before we reach that fork in the road, that we go off to developing more compassion rather than developing ill will and hostility. Because if we're not aware of what's happening, all of our empathy, all of our care for others will end up in conflict. We'll end up in hostility, and just look at the world. We're in conflict and hostility because we're caring for one bunch of people, but it's turned into hostility for the others. So there's no long-term solutions there. So what to abandon? Abandon thoughts of harming. So this is where, yes, we do need to have some discipline. And last week when we talked about that habit cycle, if we find ourselves falling into the trap of plotting revenge, wishing they would hurt themselves, happy when they do hurt themselves, wanting to throttle them, all of that, that's when we've got to change the channel. Actually get up, change the environment, do something that you love doing, and do not indulge in those thoughts. When those thoughts of wishing to harm come up, la, 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 not listening, just do not practice them because they're so strong already. So we might do that, and as good Buddhists, that's probably one of the things that we do. But it's not the end of the story, because we distract ourselves, we change the channel, we stop the thoughts of harming, then we don't do anything about what caused it. So one of the ways that we can stop the thoughts of harming also is by recognizing how hatred or ill will, it's toxic in us. It harms us. That's absolutely guaranteed. Whether it harms them, not guaranteed. So that's one really big incentive, that it will make us miserable. Even if we're right, we're going to be miserable, and we don't want that. So that's our starting point for abandoning thoughts of ill will. What to practice instead? Cultivating love and compassion for others, wishing them well, seeing how behind all the bad behavior is unhappiness, is hurt. Someone may be so brutalized in this life or so violent that there is nothing we personally can do to help them. But we can definitely know that underneath all of that is intense suffering. So that's one way that we can develop the compassion. One way that we can develop love or kindliness towards others, especially towards the enemy, is by finding something we have in common. Now, you may not want to find what you have in common with Donald Trump, but we have something in common with Donald Trump. He's a human, or whoever you would like. I mean, you may like Donald Trump, I don't know, but I always hate on the politicians, so that's my bad. But we have something in common already. We're both human beings. We both have family that we care about. We both want to be liked. We both want to have good stuff. We're both dissatisfied. But he's had more resources to make more mistakes. Whereas thankfully I haven't had all those resources and all that wealth, so I haven't made as many of those mistakes. I haven't had that power, so I haven't made the mistake with power. And he has. He's had all of that power and he hasn't known how to use it. So how can I hate him? So we have something in common. We've probably got other things in common. We might even like the same foods. Who knows? Both like hair dye. Once we find something in common, as you know, if you find someone who comes from the same hometown as you, immediately, even if you don't know them, you feel a connection. Immediately now we're connected as human beings. And there's that great movie, Independence Day. All of humanity, they were all fighting amongst each other, and then the aliens came. Now suddenly all of humanity unites against the aliens. Now suddenly we all find something in common. If we're all lost in the desert together, if we're all on a bus, bunch of tourists lost in the desert together, all the differences, they just melt into nothing. What becomes apparent is what we have in common. We're human beings trying to survive the elements. We care about each other. And so, yes, so recognize the fear and vulnerability under the bad behavior. Then we can hate, if we're going to hate the behavior, not the person, never the person. Lama Zopa Rinpoche says you've got to learn to recognize the real enemy. And the real enemy is hatred and ill will, not the person. Then, if we can do this, the result, fearlessness, confidence, energy. So imagine we all want to be fearless, don't we? None of us want to feel intimidated or anxious or shy. We look at people that have charisma and can talk to everybody and they've all got all the friends and everything. How do they do it? They're fearless. How do they get fearlessness? By this, avoiding ill will. So if we want to be fearless, we don't give ourselves a pep talk. We just cultivate kindness and abandon thoughts of harming. The result is we have a natural confidence. We're naturally open to others. We naturally recognize their good qualities, and it makes it easier for them to be good people around us. So the bumper sticker for this one, just like me, they too want to be happy. So often we'll have that thought, oh yes, I want to be happy. Everybody wants to be happy just like me. No one wants problems. We're all striving for happiness. But you've got to tack on this bit at the beginning, just like me. Might look like a little bit of the sentence, but it is the key. Just like me. Everybody out there who at the moment looks so different, who we go, I would never. They're just like me. How? Maybe in nothing else except that they don't want to suffer and they just want to be happy. It's the great leveler. So we've got a few minutes. What are your questions or comments about this, of how to abandon hostility and ill will? It's quite a big one, isn't it? Yeah, Shannon.
Well, it's not really. How do you, so, you know, this concept of just like me, everybody wants to be happy. How do you handle people who seem to derive their happiness from making you upset or making others suffer?
Yeah, that's right. Well, it's the same thing. Just like with the covetousness, we think that the happiness comes from the object. With hostility, we think if I make someone else suffer, I will feel better. And it's not just a thought. It's not just an intellectually held thing. It goes really, really deep, even to the extent, that's why we retaliate, because we hurt and we want to chuck it back. So that's what retaliation is. We have a hurt and we don't want it, so we throw it back to them and want them to hurt. And again, it's a mistaken view. So that's why we looked at the mistaken views right at the beginning, because even though that's an automatic thing, we think that if they suffer, then I won't. It's a big mistake. Nevertheless, there are many, many people in the world that are aggressive, hostile, and enjoy making others suffer. And they do get a short-term sense of power from it, a short-term sense of enjoyment from it, but it doesn't last. Just like the happiness from the stuff doesn't last, the sense of power and safety that comes from dominating others and harming others, you get a short-term hit, and then you've got to do it again. It's got to be continuously maintained. So they're continuously harming and bullying other people. And yes, there's no sugarcoating it. It's destructive and terrible. But what we can do by recognizing that and seeing behind that person is imprisoned in this distorted view, this distorted approach. And the only way that they can feel safe is by making everybody else feel unsafe. So stay away from them. Absolutely stay away from them. But the bumper sticker of everything doesn't exist in the way it first appears. Same with hostile people. They appear hostile. They are acting hostile and they are dangerous. But that's the appearance. And underneath it is this imprisonment in hostility and ill will that creates this tortured world for them. So, depending where people are on the scale of being brutalized and then responding in this way, there may be very little we can do for people like that except protect ourselves and help remove everybody else from that situation too. But what we can definitely do and have to have the presence of mind is to never hate the person. Because, in the long run, if we want to do something about it and have less hostile people, we have to understand what the mechanism is. You can't just force them not to be hostile. So this is how we can understand it from the inside. And then maybe one day there might be an opportunity where we could help. Or we might, if we have this understanding of the mechanism, when someone is about to be hostile, we might be able to say, this is beneath you. And have the confidence because we really know what's going on and we see the whole person, not just the appearance. But it's a very dicey thing, and wherever possible, remove yourself from the terrible situation. But then work on our own thoughts and feelings of hostility in the nice safety of your own meditation room or over your nice cup of tea or coffee in the morning. Yeah, so thanks, Shannon. Really good point. So a few take-home points then about the mind before we finish. I think, Wiley, you can put into the chat, there's the reflection sheets. Download link. We've got the reflection sheet, and there's on one side of the reflection sheet is overcoming harmful mental attitudes. Just some questions to get you started. Anna, just glancing over them is enough sometimes, isn't it? Just gets you thinking in that way. But then there's also on the other side a worksheet on the 4 opponent powers to do with the mind. So this is a way of whittling them down so they no longer arise. It's an exercise and it's very effective. So we'll revisit this quote again from the Buddha that we started with. All that we are is a result of all that we have thought. The mind. What's going on in our mind? Our mind creates the world. So on one hand, don't believe everything you think. So you're not your brain. We have lots of mistaken perceptions. We have all of our assumptions and projections and that we don't even know, expectations that we don't even know. When we are stressed, we get tunnel vision. We can only focus on one thing. We get really obsessive. We have fears and anxieties. All of those judgments and first appearances, just don't believe them. Don't believe them fully. You're not your brain. And also, don't believe everything you feel. Feelings are not facts. So this is really important. What you feel, it's valid, it has an effect, it can be very, very strong, but the story it tells you is not true. It's not a fact. So I'm not invalidating your feelings, but those feelings are not facts, and often they're the opposite of what the reality is. We can feel isolated, and yet we are surrounded by kindness. So we've got to recognize that feeling of loneliness and isolation and recognize the kindness around us. And then natural empathy for everybody else who's feeling lonely and isolated. So don't believe everything you feel. Feelings are not facts. Because of these two things, what we can remember is there is no absolute right way to look at a situation. There's no ultimate correct right way. There's no I am right and you are wrong. It all depends. And so this means that we have a choice. It's best to focus on the most beneficial way to look at a situation. So this is really good because it means if you still feel miserable about something, you haven't got the whole picture. You haven't found the most beneficial way to look at something. So keep analyzing, keep questioning, keep being curious. So I find this incredibly encouraging that if I'm feeling despondent or just outright miserable, I can know, Miffi, you don't have all the pieces of the puzzle. Oh, phew. Okay, what am I missing here? So then I can dive in again for more analysis rather than just keep going around stewing, oh no, oh no. So we can, with analysis, find the best way to look at a situation that's going to benefit ourselves and others in the long term, and the results will be good. And then if we have in mind all of these strategies for dealing with the most negative mental activities and put in place their positive ones instead, that will become the support for how we change our behavior and communication. So this is the long-term one. We've got to get it in place now and continue with it. And then as we start putting in place helpful habits, changing our destructive patterns, we're going to naturally respond in a good way without even trying. It'll become our default will be a positive one. So we have to start with the mind. So we've come to the end of our class. Let's dedicate the merits. Take the reflection sheets home, the homework with you, and do the little bit on the mind. Next week we're going to dive into speech and communication, a very juicy topic, as Venerable Robina says. So let's dedicate all of your good intentions, your effort, your tolerance, patience, and perseverance, coming to a class like this, quite a long class, your good intentions, your wish to be a good human being, to benefit others, to bring happiness to everyone around you and not suffering. And let's dedicate that we can do that by developing our wisdom, by beginning to see reality clearly, so we can support all of that good-heartedness, so we don't burn out, and that we can continue to develop it and continue to develop our wisdom, good-heartedness and wisdom without stopping, all the way to our complete liberation from the bondage of cyclic existence, and all the way to develop all of our innate good qualities to full Buddhahood, so we can perfectly help others. Thank you, thank you. Have a wonderful rest of the week. Take care. Enjoy. See you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you, Miffi. See you all next week.
Thank you, Wiley.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. Thank you.